My name is John Oliveras. I am a Spanish teacher at Zion Benton Township High School in Zion, Illinois.
My name is Movavi Olivera. I'm 26 years old and I'm studying to be an English secondary education teacher at Trinity International University.
My name is Daniel Tovar and I'm studying at Trinity as well for a 5-year Master of Divinity program.
Hi, my name is Damari Olivera. I'm an IMC clerk in Zion Benton High School. I work in the librarian. That's the job that I do.
Hi, my name is Samantha Oliveras. I am 30 years old and I am a part-time student here at CLC.
I think that education needs to be tailored to the student. I think the pandemic brought out the reality that we have students that all have diverse needs. And I think that when you're in the flow of a regular school year, you only focus on students that maybe have who need differentiation because of their IEPs or 504 plans. But I think the pandemic showed us, I had some students that are A students in person, that online totally were disengaged, didn't know how to connect, how to be engaged in the material. So I think the pandemic taught us that education has to be tailored to the student. I think we've got a lot of work to do in that regard moving forward.
I think the pandemic has showed us that education is a lot more important than we may have thought before, and also education doesn't just happen in the classroom. All the things that have happened around us, not only we don't see effects for children only in the classroom, but we see it in their family lives, we see it in the communities, we see it in every aspect. So I think education goes far beyond that.
For me, it's been hard to find motivation being home. It's not the same as being in a classroom. There's not that sense of responsibility because you can just turn off your face on Zoom and not have to pay attention. So you really have to find a way to have motivation in order to do well and succeed.
I think definitely that I think a lot of people have learned, and that we have learned, is that education, it's important for it to be creative, not just lecture kids, because I feel like that's not effective either way, but it's had to become more creative. So I think that's something that we have had to learn during the pandemic.
I think that these 2 years should have definitely taught us that there's a lot more room to grow, not only as a student, but also our teachers. I feel like there's a lot of ways that educators have had to be pushed and motivated to keep students engaged, and also vice versa. I feel like students have had to adapt in adjusting to pushing themselves in their homes, to holding themselves accountable. So I would say that's one big thing.
We need to think more about the supports that students have or do not have at home. I think the pandemic exacerbated the problem of students not having enough support because at-home support was not really there. It wasn't 100% present. I think even parents who were well-intentioned often didn't know how to keep up with students online, didn't know how to make them connect to the class. Hey, you need to get online, you need to do this, you need to not have your screen black, there's a lot of things that parents struggled with. And I think that we probably need to think a little bit more about the role of a school, the role that education and the school system has to help be partners with parents in their education. We do not do that well. And I think that this pandemic has shown us that parents, they need help. They need help to, really better push the student.
I think how teachers instruct students is something that needs to be thought more about.
Finding creative ways to captivate students' minds and engagement towards classes.
Definitely the use of technology for teaching is something that I think has to be thought of more, and I think also Sometimes when we have our students that come in, sometimes maybe people don't think about the situations that those children or those young students have at home and how that affects their learning. And I think during the pandemic, with them being home and being online and remote, has made us realize that sometimes some kids don't have the best environment at home, and it's made us a little more empathetic.
Most definitely how teachers' content that they've had, their structure of how they have structured a class, how that needs to be shifted or needs to be molded in times where things like the pandemic or other things, arise. Is their in-person content, still functional in a different environment or a different type of setting that's, in our case, necessarily just via computer?
I think that we have had, been, as a district, we have purchased a lot more technology helps for our district. We have subscriptions to a lot of online programs like Flipgrid, Pear Deck, even Kahoot Pro, things like that. The district has invested a lot of money in those things, and that has actually been really helpful. And as a language teacher as well, have all been things that are very effective, and they're good even when we're in person. So I would say that in regards to, like, let's say we were moving forward with the pandemic situation and we had this reality, I think one of the rules that was employed by the district was not requiring students to show their screens, and it was deemed an issue of equity, but I'm not sure I'm not sure that it is an equity issue completely. I think I can understand the argument of it being equity. There are ways that we could have managed the online sort of screen sharing issue that would have accounted for equity. Because in reality, not being able to have students on the screen, there's no way that as an educator that I could enforce the students to be listening to the material that I'm teaching and to keep them accountable for their learning. So that was not something that I think was helpful.
I don't think that I would want to move forward personally with online. So I think in a way it has taught us, like what I said earlier, about self-discipline. So I think keeping that option open, having different options for students is actually something that the pandemic has opened up, and might be a good thing that we can say that let's keep that for education.
I mean, I wouldn't, but if I had to, it would depend on the teacher. And I did like when one of the teachers that I had would put us in breakout groups. I would have questions I would have to answer and then come back and answer to the class. So it was a fun way to engage with students in a way that maybe we wouldn't have done in the classroom.
Building on technology and knowing how to use that, because like this caught us off guard, something we never thought would happen. And we kind of in the beginning were scrambling. I think that's something that we shouldn't just say, okay, it's over and forget about it, but to be mindful of that, of how we can maintain that, so that if something ever happened again, because as we know, anything could happen at any time, to be prepared for those things and not just say, oh, that was a one-time thing and forget about it. So I think that the use of technology is something we should definitely just maintain and be aware of. And what can we get rid of? Our mask.
I'll say two things. Number one, I think people automatically think that because we have been forced to go online, that somehow technology integration is more the way to go. What we have learned, we already knew this, I think, at least I did and my immediate coworkers, that students are technologically illiterate. Students are able to use their smartphones, but students do not know how to use computers. They find it very difficult to learn how to save a PDF, to send a document. These are things that do not come easy to our students. And I think that we would think that, so let's do technology, let's go the route of technology and making education more giving opportunity for access to online and all this other stuff. that might be the way to go, but that's going to be an uphill battle, I think, because our students have a lot of education in regards to technology that they really need to learn in order for them to be successful. So I guess I will say maybe more technology education in schools, because maybe that is the way of the future, but it's definitely not something that they're capable of doing right now. I will also say that sadly I have seen a lot of educators who have completely dropped the ball during this pandemic. They probably weren't 100% committed educators before the pandemic, and even through the pandemic have totally dropped the ball, not done their job, have really not serviced our students very well. And so maybe rethinking systems of tenure, the way that we evaluate teachers, I think is something that is also something we should think about post-pandemic, as we rethink education and we rethink the way schools are done.
More creativity on part of instructors, or just in the educational system in general, like sometimes with Zoom, it didn't start off as creative as it is now. There's like, different kind of programs that you can, I think, like use in Zoom, but just like maybe having more of that so that teachers also have more tools to kind of make the classes a little bit different and engaging.
We as students, especially college students, maybe this doesn't apply necessarily to public school students, but us as college students should definitely be demanding way better engagement from professors. Luckily, this semester, I feel like all my professors have done a really good job with doing their best, and I know that it is something that has been a change for them. But I think that as a student, a student who's paying, out of pocket for their education, you always want to try to get, the best of what, you're being given. And I feel that if the pandemic were to happen again within the next year, or e-learning and remote learning was something that was still going to have to take place, I could say that I would definitely demand a little bit more creativity and maybe just a little bit more of a different outline or a different type of style to online learning.